Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a campaign in real time so that you can see all the steps, all the thought process that goes into it, warts and all, as they say. I'm RJ Kerr, your host as always, and if you're joining us for the very first time, what we are doing is creating a custom campaign completely from scratch, including a domain of dread that we are creating from the ground up. We've already done a ton of work on this already, where we have uh, figured out how our characters are going to get into this domain of dread via a portal that opens up on the Blood Moon. We've talked about motivations for what might draw them in. We have talked about where they're going to start their adventure, where they land in a shanty town called Freeport on the edge of an inland sea. This Domain of Dread takes place pretty much exclusively in and around this inland sea that used to be a basin that held a thriving empire, now flooded and in ruins, and contains an elemental evil that we're calling Ovander, sort of our Strahd for this particular Domain of Dread. Uh, we have built out the very first adventure in here where the characters get kidnapped and are briefly enslaved and then have to escape captivity, and in doing so, discover the existence of an artifact that gives the wielder power over this domain. And it becomes obvious that this artifact is the key to escaping this domain of dread, that it's what the characters are going to need to get out of here. And so now we're working on a part of the adventure where the characters get proactive. They have escaped captivity and are now out and in the world looking for this artifact so that they can, well, escape with their lives. So we have built out, or we are in the process of building out a node structure style adventure for this, where the characters enter into this adventure and can investigate each of these nodes, finding clues that lead them to other nodes that eventually lead them to the the actual artifact itself. And so we're building out little mini adventures for these nodes to make the investigation more fun and to sort of world build a little bit in this environment. And we've done a number of these so far. We or at least we should we've put a lot of we've generated some thought for a number of these so far. We've built one in its entirety, and now we're working on the second one, the second investigative node that takes place at what we're calling a ghost ship castle. Let me share my screen with you here real quick so that we can get into this. And so this is our Ghost Ship Castle caper. Effectively, we are running a heist style, raid style kind of adventure is what we're creating here, where the characters have to invade this Sahuagin stronghold made up of the remnants of old ghost ships that have been piled up around this natural stone arch off the coast. And their idea is that they're in there looking for a ship's log that they know, an old ship's log that they know has information about the location of this lost artifact. So we have been building this out using a modified version of the 5 room dungeon, where instead we're using what I call a 5 scene dungeon to flush out our heist style adventure here. And so we we broke that out into 5 sort of instances, or 5 scenes. If I'm going to repeat myself, I might as well. 5 scenes. So the first is the entry for a 5 room dungeon, right? And so that's our heist planning. This is where the characters have the opportunity to kind of case the joint, gather intel, learn what they can prior to their incursion, and make a solid plan because they're rewarded for good planning in this adventure. So we know that we need to have information on this sort of stuff they could figure out: guard patrols, the external layout, what they could learn about the interior without before they get in there, and that kind of stuff. So we've got that as our entry. Then we have a setback. As you know, for our setback for the 5 room dungeon, we are talking about raising the alarm and what happens if they get caught. Um, and so we've set up a number of encounters and broken them out into action groups. And so effectively, these are encounters that are initially keyed to specific areas, but some of which will wander around the stronghold. making it a more dynamic sort of place, and frankly, making it a lot more fun because it's just a lot more fun to kind of sneak your way through through enemy stronghold uh, if there's the chance that somebody's going to come down the corridor that you're slinking through randomly, and you don't just have to beat the passive perception of all of the rooms adjacent to the hallway. We want there to be a little bit of dynamic movement to add some tension, some enjoyable tension to the escapade. Um, and so that was our setback. Our third is what we're going to be working on today, and this is what in the five-room dungeon parlance would be key to puzzle. Really, it's more of a challenge in this case here, and it's a simple one. It's find the object they're looking for. It's find the ship's log. Um, so I should say it's a deceptively simple one. It's simple to state. It's going to be more difficult for the characters to execute. And so we'll work on filling out some of these locations today. We've done a little bit of that. And then for our climax, this would take the place of the big bad evil guy encounter, right? Because we don't, the characters are should be rewarded for avoiding big fights if they're doing a heist style sort of thing here. And so but we still want something climactic, something that makes the ending of the adventure something more than just repeating the beginning of the adventure. So, you know, so we have this idea of that when the characters get to the ship's log, a group of dignitaries from a group allied to the Sahuagin will show up and sort of change the routine, right? So the characters don't necessarily know what the new guard patterns are or the new redistribution of personnel throughout the stronghold, and making it a little dicier getting out, maybe making it a little more dangerous because they're kind of flying a little bit blind. And so that's our climax for our five-room dungeon. And then our fifth room, the reward is pretty simple, right? It's just the ship's log and the clues that come out of that. And we'll work on building those out in a future episode as well. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone through this complete summary of what we've got, we're going to jump in and start filling in some of these keyed locations here. Um, we have already, like I said, delineated the encounters that exist in these spaces, so we don't need to worry about spending time doing that. Um, we uh, uh, we have also denoted which spaces are flooded, half flooded, which ones aren't flooded at all, and so that'll be important. We'll jump back and forth on this. One thing I would note to you, just kind of as a practical thing, is that when I would sit down to run an adventure like this, I would have these action groups on a separate sheet of paper, um, so that I can just kind of have them, either inside my DM screen or on the table next to me, that kind of thing, so I can kind of keep track and make notes on it as there's movement around the facility. And that way I don't have to keep flipping up to that and then back to the key room descriptions. I can just kind of have the two there next to each other and reference them both back and forth. So if you're wondering if whether or not it would be helpful to note them down in the room descriptions here as well, you certainly could if that helps you out, but I would just have it on a separate, easily accessible sheet of paper um, if I was going to run this. And even running this online, even running this with a computer, I would probably print out the action groups just so I had a reference for it, or open them up in a different window or something along those lines. Cool. All right. So all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and let's get creative. Let's come up with some descriptions for these spaces and some things that might exist in them. As always, this is an interactive live stream. So if you have comments and questions and thoughts and feelings, or there's stuff that you want to talk about, toss that into the chat. I love hearing from you all while we do this stuff. You guys come up with some really creative stuff. In fact, I'd say some of the most creative stuff that we have developed on the stream has come from you guys. All right, so let's start with down here where the shark pens. Obviously, this is a flooded space, but let's be diligent. Let's check. Yep, flooded 13. And so let's go ahead and get a description of the shark pens. Description. All right, so let's think about What would shark pens look like if you were a Sahuagin and you had a corral that kept sharks in it? Um, would it be kind of like a you know a maybe a figure eight kind of cave structure that had grating on one side so the sharks can be let in and out, but they can be kept in there so they don't wander off. I say a figure eight because most sharks have to keep moving to avoid drowning. Right? They don't have the ability to force water over their own gills. They have to use their motion to propel that. And so you'll notice that in captivity, a lot of sharks swim in figure eights. Just a fun fact. Just so they don't bump into walls and that sort of thing because they can't back up either. Some sharks can. A lot of sharks can't back up. Um, so maybe that kind of structure. Let's see. We've already got a comment here. Jonathan Frost. What if they used the rigging as nets from the old wreck? Yeah, maybe use. So maybe create a net wall in there or something like that. That's designed to kind of pen off the sections of this structure. Do we think that this would be? Do we think that this room overall would be man-made, or do we think that it would incorporate some of the stone from the natural ark? So would it be more of a cave, or would it be more of something that I say man-made, Sahuagin made? Maybe something more that the Sahuagin built from parts of the old ship, or maybe it's just a cage style structure that's just made of old rigging that's been repurposed as nets. Let's see here. Baker's Dozen says, I imagine Sahuagin would understand the nature of sharks and their need to be mobile and build a pen accordingly. Figure eight is not a bad idea. Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, so maybe we have one that's we got another comment here that says Baker's Dozen says I had a game with them decades ago and had them carve out channels, tunnels, and pathways within coral so the reef hid everything. That's a cool idea. We could certainly have maybe some reef growing in this area here as well. I like that. It gives us some something a little evocative for this. Jonathan says, could it have a gate that leads to the open sea so they can move sharks around or add more to the pens? I think it should. I think that's a great idea because that also gives us another access point that perhaps our characters could sneak in through when they case the joint or when they decide to make their incursion. So I like the idea of a second access point. So why don't we say that a natural sea cave within the stone arch has been expanded into a figure eight to a figure eight shape by the Sahuagin. Let's see here. Say bioluminescent, as I misspelled that, of course. Bioluminescent. Come on. Autocorrect for me. You can do it. Fix it in a minute here. Bioluminescent coral grows on the walls. The passage that leads into the stronghold is blocked by a rope net made of repurposed rigging. There is an exit to to the sea, which is blocked off by an iron. Iron is gonna rust by a. Well, let's think it'd be rusty. Why not? By an iron portcullis choked with coral. And I misspelled that one too. Huzzah. Oh well. Okay. Portcullis. Great. Okay. All right. So it looks like we also got a couple comments while I was doing that here. Baker's Dozen says probably a cave or something they made so that other predators can't steal their sharks. Yeah, good point. That's kind of what I was thinking along the lines in terms of making it a cave. Is we've got this kind of stone arch that the thing is built around. It would make sense there'd be eroded points in there. Those would be places that the Sahuagin would build off of as natural defense. I hadn't really thought about in terms of preventing predation, since sharks are apex predators, but they're apex predators in our world, not necessarily in this domain of dread. So that yeah, so I think that works well. And with that extra access point, we've added a new place for the characters to potentially access the stronghold through. Cool. So they have more than just the gatehouse. Baker's Dozen. Don't forget those remora schooling and sticking with them. Yeah, that's a good idea. You know, remora bites hurt. I can speak from experience. They're not comfortable, and because remoras sometimes come around divers too. And let's put them in here. Let's put them in. Let's put them in as remoras. Let's put them in as a hazard, a sea life hazard in here. Maybe we reskin them as sturges or something along those lines, or reskin sturges as remoras or something along those lines. But I kind of like the idea of having them in here as just something that can be an uncomfortable nuisance. All right. So, okay, cool. So we have the shark pens. Let's mark our hazard here. Hazard. Biting remoras. School with the sharks. Potentially clamping on to passing other passing creatures. Cool. Yeah. That the new like Sturge Swarm, I could probably be pretty easily repurposed to a bunch of remoras. We can think about that. And it's got some fun mechanics. I played a game over the weekend where Sturge Swarms nearly kill us. Yeah, we were fighting them while on ropes and climbing our characters were fighting them while on ropes and climbing a cliff. But it became but these swarms became hazardous nonetheless, dangerous nonetheless. All right, so let's see here. What else do we want to jump into? We're going to kind of jump around as we have inspiration here. Let's see what else. Let's do the prison cells. They're half flooded. They're right here. So let's say description. Okay, so for the prison cells, I kind of view this where my brain's kind of going with this, and then let me know if you have other thoughts on this. It's half flooded, but it's making me envision the prisons in um, Castle Ravenloft. Might be a little too on the nose to kind of do that. They're half-flooded prison cells as well, but so they could effectively just be, you know, the brigs from a couple of these ships that have been kind of hobbled together to create sort of this ad hoc kind of prison um, with thick wood grated doors, doors that aren't rusty from the seawater, but that are flooded up to maybe the abdomen or something along those lines. Um, we should have something else in here too to kind of give this a little bit of flavor. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on what we might stick in the prison cells to give it, not necessarily, we don't even necessarily have to give it a hazard, but something to give it just a little more feel, something to make it a little more unique than just a generic prison cell half flooded with water. Um, but in the meantime, I'm going to start noting that um, these cells are made up of old ships' brigs repurposed into an ad hoc cell block. Each is barred by a stout wooden grate that serves as the door. So each is barred by a stout wooden grate that serves as the door, and is half flooded with seawater. Okay, so Jonathan Frost says, could there be a prisoner that links to one of the other locations? I like that idea. We're looking for other ways to put some clues in here. That's a good one. That's an absolutely good one. Let's see here. Baker's Dozen says, I like that you turn the Remoras into a hazard. Thank you. I appreciate that. I could tell you some old sea stories of trying to keep Remoras out of my board shorts when I was diving years and years ago in like Fiji. But I'll spare you the spare you the war stories. All right, or the dive stories, the fish stories. All right, so I like the idea of another prisoner in here. So let's encounter. Ooh, where do we want to link this prisoner to? Let's take a look at what we need clues for. Okay, so maybe the prisoner leads to either the Wizard's Tower or the Moving Isle. The Moving Isle could be a good one because we could have somebody who'd been in there and is a little bit, years of captivity held at the hands of the Sahuagin, is a little bit out of it, but has these grandiose stories of a moving isle that they can tell, especially if the characters get captured. And that yeah, and so it could give us it could give the characters that one of the simple clues to kind of get there. Um, yeah, Jonathan Frost says moving aisles has very little detail at this point, so that sounds awesome. Okay, cool. Then we'll go with that. That's what we'll do. So let's get back to our Castle Caper here. I keep talking about putting Kuo-toa in this. Maybe that's the prisoner. Maybe the prisoner is a Kuo-toa that's trapped in there. And let's see here. Baker's Dozen says, I know this is really gross and it's really more of a setting, but it'll make your players uneasy. Floating feces. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll usually leave details like that out unless they're really pertinent. Just because I'll add them in when we play, depending on the group and depending on their level of um, I don't want to say interest in that kind of thing because that sounds awkward. But like for example, I have a game where a character gets where one of the players really doesn't like it when you talk about vomit at all. Like that makes them very uncomfortable. And so like you know we won't have that in there. Whereas like in the same campaign in a different character, I might with different players, I might talk about them being in a tavern and hearing the sound of somebody retching in the corner or something along those lines. Um, so yeah, that's the kind of thing that I would add in narration to this, um, just to add to do exactly that, to make this an uncomfortable situation for the players if they're the right group of players for that kind of narration. Um, but it's a very accurate kind of detail for the sort of thing that would exist in here. It would certainly make it more realistic. Let's see here. A Kuo-toa prisoner lives, we'll say inhabits one of the cells. He's been in cap. Oh, yeah, I can never pronounce that. Lokatha prisoner. Lakatha prisoner. Um, yeah, that could be good. That could be good. All right. Off screen here because IP, intellectual property. I've got D&D Beyond up. So let's take a look at that stat block just so that we have a vibe for it. Let's see here. These resilient, proud fish folk have endured war, slavery, and mistreatment in the hands of other aquatic creatures. Yeah. So who again? They dwell in submerged tribal communities along seacoasts and hunt both. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Let's do that. Get rid of the Kuo-toa. Let's make it our Lokatha. Okay. So actually, this brings up an interesting point. Something that I will something that I'll mention here is that when you're writing adventures for yourself, yeah, I love using all the resources that I've got and pulling them all together and that kind of thing. If we were writing this for somebody, if we were going to write this and say put it up on the DM's Guild or something along those lines, I might stick with creatures that are found in the monster manual, just because then whoever purchases and plays it only has to have one source book for that. But we aren't writing this to post on like the DM's Guild and to sell. We are writing this for ourselves. So Lokatha is a great idea. And so he's been in captivity for ages. Let's see here. His eyes have grown large and sightless from the lack of light, and his mind wanders. However, he knows of a secret, there we go, shrine to Ovander, built on the back of a gigantic dragon turtle. And speaks of the artifact being once kept there. Okay, cool. Locatha? LOL, I say Locatha. Yeah, that's probably correct. I'll be honest with you, half the time, Baker's dozen, half the time I have to look up the pronunciation for these uh, for these creatures. That's one of the things I love about D&D Beyond is it has the little button that'll let you click it and it'll read to you what the how it's pronounced. Because that is just not one of my superpowers, figuring out how to pronounce some of these words. The only reason I know how to do so again is because I looked it up. Let's cool. All right, so we've got our prisoner who's been in here for a little while and going a little nuts, but has this grand tale that he can share with the characters, and it turns out to be a clue, leading them to a new adventure location. So let's record that before we forget. We'll say, you know what? I'm just going to copy and paste that bit so we don't waste a lot of time rewriting it. Control copy. All right. Paste it. And we'll say C3 because that's where it leads. Cool. Okay. All right. So real quick, we are about halfway through our time slot for the evening here, which means it's time for me to give a shameless self-plug. So I am not just a guy who writes adventures on the internet. I am also a professional dungeon master, and I run games both in person and online on startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. I have got campaigns, I've got one shots that I run, starting new stuff that's starting all the time, stuff that's currently going that's looking for new characters or new players, I should say. And I do custom bookings as well. For example, this coming up this weekend, I've got a custom in-person game where we're going to be playing my Hag Heist adventure with a group of folks. So if you're local to the Huntsville, Alabama area, we can play in person. If you're not, we can play online. And I would love to play with any of you, whether you're a DM looking for some time as a player, or whether you are a player who wants to just find a new group and a new game, one shot or campaign, or whether you just want to find out if I know what I'm talking about, because the proof's in the pudding, right? You can kind of jump into one of my adventures and see if I really should be trusted about my advice on DMing, and see if I know what I'm doing. But in any case, I hope that you'll come and check me out on there, and that you'll jump into one of my games and one of my tables. Again, that's startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. And I hope to meet you all at the table sometime. All right, shameless self plug over. Let's get back to our adventure. Okay, so. Okay, so we've got our prison cells pretty much knocked out there. We've got a description, we've got something interesting in there for the characters to find. Let's move on to another one. Let's hit the crow's nest real quick, because that's not flooded. That was what, area 8, I think I said. Yeah, area 8. It's not flooded. It is kind of at the top of this stronghold, and it is we've got a couple Sahuagin who are up there keeping watch. How many did we say are there? Is it two? Yeah, two Sahuagin warriors. Now, Sahuagin uh, have to submerge themselves in water periodically. So there would be good movement there, kind of back and forth as every hour or so as the rotation was changed, um, because it isn't going to be dry as a bone. But let's go ahead and give this place a feel. How high do you think this should be above? Should the crow's nest, right, on a makeshift mast above the stronghold, sort of a sentry's tower? How high do you think it should be from the next lowest level? Um, because I could see that becoming a factor in how this is engaged with. Um, let's say crow's nest is a hold over from one of the repurposed ships. Hold over from one of the repurposed ships, and now serves as a sentry's tower. It is manned night and day, but the shifts change frequently so that sentries won't, so that the sentries' gills won't dry out. The platform is, and what did we come up with? We said Jonathan Frost said 20 feet, maybe. Yeah, I could do 20. I could see 20 feet. It's 20 feet above the next lowest level, and is accessible via, say, by climbing the rigging that stretches from the deck, the lower deck, to the top of the mast. Cool. Great. We have an encounter there. We know things are going to be moving in and out. I don't know that we necessarily need anything else to give that a little bit of flavor. It's not the usual sort of place that we would have in a centuries that we would have in your typical sort of dungeon environment or your typical sort of stronghold. So I think we can kind of leave that one as is. Let's see. What else do we want to work on? I guess let's hit temple and the treasure room, perhaps, so that we have, 15 through 8 done before we wrap up for the evening here. So let's hit the temple. The temple is flooded. Yep, flooded. And who inhabits the temple? Per group. One Sahuagin priest attended by 4 Sahuagin warriors hold prayers in the temple. All right. So, what would a Sahuagin temple look like? They are typically worshippers of sharks, and we could keep them that way. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing that says that we couldn't, or there's no downside to doing that necessarily. We could also have them we could also have them followers of Evander, if we really wanted to do that. But I think we already kind of have a Temple of Evander kind of in the works here, since we've got that on the back of this dragon turtle, right? So maybe we want it to be something else. Maybe we want to stick with the sharks. Um, so Jonathan Frost says we had previously posited this wasn't a Temple of Evander, correct? I believe so. I think we had decided that this was a classic Sahuagin Sharky temple. So I think uh, it definitely needs some shark detailing. It definitely needs probably some coral. It probably needs some good, maybe some kelp curtains kind of thing here. This should probably be one of the most aesthetic places in our stronghold. Um, so what if we had kind of like it's uh, maybe it's built from like the inverted hull of a ship, so we kind of have that arching roof to it that is really the keel of an old ship, that kind of deal. So it's kind of like inverted there. Maybe we've got kelp growing up along the sides, and they're kind of creating curtains along the walls. Um, and you're already ahead of me here, Jonathan. The shark jaw skeletons. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking over the altar, one of those big sets of open mouth shark jaws with all the teeth in it. There is kind of, um, is kind of in a place of pride over that. Um, I so if this is flooded and they're sorry, my train of thought as I'm thinking about what else would be in there, and immediately my mind went to, well, a temple would have pews, would have places for or places for the faithful to sit and kneel or pray or what have you. But if this is flooded and it's for fish folk creatures, aquatic creatures, they probably just float. They probably don't need pews. Um, so it might be a relatively open space. Um, Yeah, and then I wonder what the altar would look like. Well, let's capture what we've got here first, and then we'll come into the details. Um, but I like the shark jaw skeleton thing there, Jonathan. It's a good one. So let's say this temple. Ooh, it's all still bold. This temple is the let's see here is built from an inverted ship's hull, giving the roof or the structure a vaulted ceiling. Long curtains of kelp run down the sides of the nave, um, leading to the altar, above which resides a massive set of skeletal sharks' jaws. Okay. Now let's think about the altar itself, because I don't envision it being. Maybe it's a big piece of coral. Maybe the altar is a big piece of coral, because I don't envision it being made of stone like we would in sort of our typical kind of, like dwarven temple or something along those lines. And I don't envision it being made of wood, because I don't think that would really have the religious resonance to the Sahuagin that it might to other cultures like a Druid Circle or something along those lines. Um, so perhaps it is a large piece of branching coral that creates kind of kind of a natural shelf like this. We've got branching coral on one side and kind of growing out, branching coral on the other side, and it has sort of natural space in the middle here um, for for the various objects of importance uh, to this particular faith. Um, yeah, I like that. I want to make sure that we don't overuse coral in this adventure, though, too, because we've used a number of it. Um, let's see here, carved into stylized swimming sharks on the branches. Yeah, yeah. Maybe, maybe. Yeah. I think, Jonathan. I think that's a good idea too. Um, let's say, yeah. Okay. So let's get this down. Um, the altar is an enormous piece of branching coral. The um, the branches have been carved into stylized sharks swimming outward with jaws open. Cool. And is there anything that we would say that would be important that we would put so that would be kind of on the altar, right? Because like we would, we might think in sort of our typical sort of temples and things like that, that there would be candles or censers, that kind of thing that would be here. But again, underwater, I don't know that fire and smoke would be things that the Sahuagin would really kind of resonate with. Baker's Dozen says, think about the Senate chamber in Star Wars movies 1 through 3, except it is chunks of stone that the humans sit or stand on instead of those pod crafts. Yeah. Yeah, so kind of an amphitheater kind of style is what you're getting at there. Yeah, yeah. I bet they would because they could easily move in 3 dimensions. So it'd be easy to kind of get there. The altar would be floating in the center of the room or held by chains or vines or plant life. That's. I hadn't even thought about it being kind of a temple in the round, but I like that. It makes it very different. Um, that's a really good idea, Baker's Dozen. That's a really good idea. Okay. Let's see here. Then we need to adjust this. Long curtains kelp running down the nave, leading to let's see, leading to the an altar floating in the center, above which resides a massive set of skeletal shark's jaws. Okay. The altar is an enormous piece of branching coral. The branches have been carved into stylish sharks when we open. Yeah. And the altar is held. The branches. No. So the altar is an enormous piece of branching coral, floating in the middle of the water column and held in place by ropes of braided kelp. Yeah. Okay. And then the branches have been carved in stylish sharks swimming outward with open jaws. Okay. So Jonathan says a bone relic of a coral encrusted skull or something like that of a venerated high priest. Um, and then yeah, nice addition, Baker's Dozen. Very evocative. I can agree with that sentiment. I like that a lot. It's kind of changed my whole idea for how this room would look. Um, what if the altar was actually a massive anemone? Ooh. Ooh. Yeah. I kind of. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay. All right. Yeah, we're doing that. Okay. We'll swap this. Let's see. The altar is an enormous piece. Is an enormous. Uh, anemone floating in the middle of the column, held in place by ropes of braided kelp. So it wouldn't be carved then. And did I misspell that? Yeah, I did. Cool. Great. I like that a lot. And ooh, it gives us a hazard for this space. The priest would be immune to the sting of this anemone, but our players might not be. Although in real life, anemones won't hurt you if you touch them. Just FYI, you'll hurt it, but you won't hurt them, or they won't hurt you. But yeah, we could have a stinging altar hazard. The tentacles of the anemone are altar are stinging. Characters who get within 5 feet of the altar must make a con saving throw or take 1d. We'll say it's for 3rd level. We'll say 1d8 acid damage. Maybe we'll work on that later. But that's yeah. So who again are immune to this? To the anemone's sting. Cool. I like that. Let's see here. Baker's Dozen says temple typically always has candles lit. Yep, maybe utilize more of that bioluminescent life as if they were actual candles and sconces. Yeah. Yeah. What if, along that vein, there's what if we had like sort of like bubbles, like sort of almost like gelatinous bubbles that were kind of woven into the kelp along the walls there, and that had bioluminescent jellyfish kind of living in there or something along, or bioluminescent something kind of living in there to add that light to it. So we had these sort of orbs of bioluminescent light woven in like almost like living gemstones throughout the kelp. I kind of like that idea. So let's. All right, thanks, Jonathan. I'm glad you agree with me. As long as we're going for a living kind of temple here, which I think is kind of what we're building, and very cool. Let's put some living light in there too. Let's say long curds of kelp run down the sides of the nave, leading to an altar floating in the center, above which resides a massive set of skeletal jaws. The altar. Let's see here, the kelp. Let's actually put that here. Let's say the kelp No. We'll say uh, Latinus globes of uh, glowing bioluminescent bio. I'm going to misspell this again, aren't I? Luminescent. Gelatinous globes of bioluminescent. Um, we could say algae, probably. Make it bioluminescent algae are woven into the kelp like um, like head-sized glowing orbs that cast a blue light throughout the temple. Cool. All right. I think we've got our temple done here. And we are coming up on our time for the end. So I think this is where we are going to go ahead and put a pin in it. So I just want to say thank you all so much for joining me this evening. I really, really, really enjoy this creative time with you all. You come up with such fantastic ideas. You look at this stuff in a way that is different from how I look at it, and really together, I think we come up with just some incredible stuff. So it's so much fun to get to build this with you all. Thank you so much for doing this with me, and thank you for all of your ideas. Especially thank you to Jonathan and Baker's Dozen for being so active in the chat today and coming up with such great concepts and thoughts for this. Thank you. If you guys have enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that stuff helps keep me motivated to keep doing this, help the channel grow. It helps people find the channel and brings in more viewers. So thank you in advance for doing that. And if you want to play some D&D with me, come look me up on startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. Jump into one of my tables. I would love to get to meet you over a game of actual D&D as well as here online. I'll have another video, another live stream that we're going to be doing this Wednesday during our usual time. We won't have one on Friday, but next week we'll be doing Monday, Wednesday, and Friday again as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing you then. We'll see you on Wednesday. And before I go, looks like we got one more comment in the chat here. It says, Baker's Dozen, you could probably still keep what you have and have an enemy attached to what you described so that it's the actual altar on the stone that's floating. Or the actual hazard on the stone that's floating. Yeah. We could work on that. We might tweak this a little bit, but I really like where our temple's going here, and I really appreciate the ideas. This living temple, I think, is just such a cool concept, and not one that I've played with before, which makes me extra excited about it. All right. Well, thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you all on Wednesday. I will talk to you then. Bye now.